Hi, and welcome to Validate the Markup Language Document Against the Requirements. So what we're looking at is we're looking at validation and we're looking at checking. Okay, validation is not checking if something is correct, that is verification. Validation is checking to see if what we have can fit or could be correct. Okay, so it's important to draw that distinction. And what are we looking for? Firstly, we're looking to see that the page we've built actually meets the client brief. So the client brief gives us that document to tell us what we actually have to do. And so we need to make sure we fulfill that. So at the end of the process, when we've made our project, we need to make sure that the page we've made actually makes the brief. So you basically use the brief as a checklist, and you go through: does it do this? Does it do this? Does it do this? Does it do this? And you come to a conclusion about whether you've done the right thing or not. We also need to test it. So we need to make sure that the page actually works. That's really important. So we need to make sure all the links work. We need to make sure all the media works. We need to make sure all the information is correct, etc. So there's a really in-depth testing process. And this testing process would happen on both ends. So the web developer would do testing to make sure that the page they've built actually works. The client should also do their testing to make sure that what they're paying for is a working page. And sometimes the developer will grab things the client misses and vice versa. Similarly, this checking of the client brief, that should also happen on both ends. You can't just take a web developer's word for it that they've developed what you've asked them for. You need to check it as well. You're paying that money. You want to make sure that that you're getting what you've paid for. So the client should check the web page to see if it matches the brief. The web developer should do the same. And the client should test the website, and the web developer should do that as well. We also need to look at consistency. So the website should look the same in any browser. That's the whole point. We don't want it to look different depending on what browser you have. So one of the ways in which we can help to ensure consistency is to make sure that it complies with the rules of the language we've used. So HTML has a set of rules, okay, a specific set of ways in which it can be coded. Many web browsers are very forgiving with these rules. And so if you write the wrong thing, sometimes the page will be able to understand that, and it will either display it correctly or display it incorrectly because it makes its best guess, or not display anything at all. Okay, similar to English. So there is set rules for English, and we don't always use those rules when we speak. The name of our country is called Australia, but you might pronounce it Australia. But because of the way we work, we can understand what someone means by those things. The problem is, though, that people can interpret those in different ways, and so therefore you don't necessarily have consistency with their meaning. The W3C, or the World Wide Web Consortium, they're the group that actually developed the rules for each markup language. So they've written the rules for HTML5, they've written the rules for CSS, and so it makes sense when you're developing a web page that you actually check with them to make sure that your page follows those rules. There's a section on the W3 site called the validator, and you can Google W3C HTML validator and W3C CSS validator, and these things will come up. So what you need to be able to do is put your page into these validators and then make sure that they are correct. Failing to do so will mean you're not competent, but also will mean that you are not developing a proper web page. And that is validating markup language against the requirements.